Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story unfolds across two different yet equally intense battlefields, one in the dark underbelly of the global slave trade, and the other on the war-torn waters of the Black Sea. The US Navy and the DEA have just carried out one of the most shocking and high-stakes operations in modern history, uncovering a $7 billion human trafficking network that spanned continents and rescuing 117 people who were found locked inside steel shipping containers. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, the Crimea Bridge, a symbol of Russian pride and strategic control, has once again been struck, triggering chaos, panic, and a new wave of uncertainty in Moscow's war efforts. Both these stories reveal the scale of human suffering, the limits of power, and the cost of defiance on the global stage. It all began when the US Navy received intelligence from the DEA about suspicious maritime activity in the Caribbean and West African waters. A fleet of commercial cargo vessels, all registered under shell companies, had been making irregular stops in uncharted waters and avoiding port inspections. At first glance, it looked like another smuggling operation, perhaps drugs or illegal arms, but as Navy reconnaissance drones zoomed in on thermal readings from the containers, they detected something chilling: heat signatures consistent with human presence. That's when the mission shifted from interception to rescue. What followed was a coordinated strike involving two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, a Coast Guard cutter, and DEA special operations teams boarding three separate cargo ships in the open sea. Inside, what they found was horrifying. Behind thick steel walls welded shut from the outside were men, women, and children, malnourished, dehydrated, and barely clinging to life. Some had been locked inside for weeks, moved like commodities from one ship to another in a floating nightmare of modern slavery. The interior of those ships told a story of unimaginable cruelty. The containers were retrofitted with makeshift ventilation holes and plastic drums for waste, but there was no light, no food beyond ration scraps, and no medical care. The DEA later confirmed that many of the captives had been abducted from conflict zones across Africa and Southeast Asia, sold through online dark web networks that used cryptocurrency for anonymity. Some were bound for illegal labor markets, others for forced servitude in cartel-controlled industries. It was the kind of horror story that reminded everyone how far human greed can go when hidden behind corporate fronts and deep-sea secrecy. One of the DEA agents on scene reportedly said it was like opening a tomb. The smell of death and desperation was overwhelming. Yet among the cries for help, there was also an unbreakable will to survive. Once the victims were safely transferred to the Navy medical ship, the full scale of the operation began to emerge. Data pulled from the ship's navigation logs, encrypted communications, and offshore accounts revealed connections stretching from Latin America to Eastern Europe. The operation's mastermind was suspected to be a former logistics magnate who used his shipping empire as a cover for human trafficking, laundering billions through fake export contracts and shell firms in Panama, Dubai, and Cyprus. The US Navy tracked over a dozen ships linked to the same network, while the DEA worked with Interpol and Europol to freeze over $7 billion in assets. This was not just a bust, it was a blow to one of the most powerful and secretive trafficking syndicates ever discovered on the high seas. The mission also underscored how the Navy's global surveillance systems and maritime drones are increasingly being used not only for warfare, but also to combat transnational crimes that threaten human security. Meanwhile, as the world was still processing that rescue mission, breaking news erupted from the Black Sea. The Crimea Bridge, a massive, symbolic structure connecting mainland Russia to the occupied Crimean Peninsula, was hit again. Explosions ripped through its eastern spans, sending fire and debris raining into the dark waters below. Satellite imagery later confirmed that at least one section of the bridge had collapsed, disrupting Russia's critical military supply lines to its forces in southern Ukraine. The Kremlin immediately accused Ukraine of carrying out a terrorist attack, while Kiev remained silent, letting the evidence speak for itself. Analysts say this strike was not just a physical attack but a psychological one, another reminder that Russia's control over Crimea is far from secure. For Moscow, the bridge has always represented both pride and vulnerability. It's a symbol of annexation, but also a single point of failure, And once again it has proven that even the most fortified structures can't escape the reach of modern warfare. Russian state media tried to contain the panic, insisting that damage was minor and repairs were already underway. But eyewitness videos told another story: massive flames, buckled steel, and the unmistakable image of trucks and cars abandoned in chaos. Traffic was halted for hours, and emergency services struggled to reach the site amid fears of secondary explosions. The strike sent shockwaves through Russia's political and military leadership. Every time the bridge is hit, it challenges the Kremlin's narrative of control and undermines the logistical backbone of its occupation forces. More importantly, it puts Russia in a bind: retaliate too hard and risk escalation, do nothing and appear weak. This latest incident reportedly forced Russia to reroute supplies through occupied land routes that are longer, more vulnerable, and constantly targeted by Ukrainian drones and artillery. Inside Russia, frustration and paranoia are mounting. Security officials have tightened surveillance around major infrastructure, fearing that saboteurs may be operating inside Russian territory. For many Russians, the bridge's repeated destruction has become a haunting symbol of the country's faltering war strategy. The Crimean population, already living under constant drone alerts and fuel shortages, now faces renewed uncertainty. In Moscow, the political elite are caught between denial and dread. Each new strike deepens the sense that Russia's war ambitions are unraveling faster than they can repair the damage. Meanwhile, Ukraine sees the attack as a powerful statement, not just a tactical success, but proof that even in a prolonged war, strategic precision can reshape the battlefield. When comparing both stories, the Navy's fight against human trafficking and the Crimea Bridge attack, a deeper connection emerges. Both expose the hidden battles shaping our world today. One fought against greed and exploitation, the other against occupation and aggression. The US Navy and DEA operation shows that modern warfare isn't just about missiles and submarines. It's about information dominance, rapid coordination, and moral responsibility. The rescue of those 117 souls from steel boxes serves as a reminder that in the age of globalized crime, no ocean is too wide for justice to reach. On the other hand, the repeated strikes on the Crimea Bridge show that power, no matter how absolute it appears, is fragile when confronted by persistence and ingenuity. Russia's billion-dollar bridge may symbolize empire, but every explosion tears at the illusion of permanence. The operation at sea also revealed a growing trend in U.S. defense policy, a focus on humanitarian intervention and multi-agency cooperation. While the Navy provided the logistics, the DEA handled the intelligence and post-rescue investigation. This fusion of military precision and law enforcement expertise could mark a new chapter in combating global human trafficking. Experts estimate that nearly 50 million people worldwide are trapped in modern slavery, generating over $150 billion annually in illegal profits. The $4.7 billion seizure and the liberation of the captives represent a critical victory, but it's only a fraction of the wider crisis. Still, the message is clear. No matter how deep these networks hide, technology and international cooperation are catching up. For the survivors, the road ahead will be long and painful. Many are undergoing trauma care and rehabilitation aboard the Navy hospital ship before being transferred to safe locations. Some have already begun speaking with investigators, identifying captors and describing the routes used by traffickers. Their testimonies are expected to lead to dozens of further arrests and raids across Europe and Asia. Behind every dollar seized and every name uncovered lies a story of human resilience, of people who refused to die in darkness and were finally brought back into the light. Back in Eastern Europe, Russia's challenge continues to grow. With each strike on the Crimea Bridge, its logistical grip weakens, forcing the Kremlin to commit more resources to defense rather than offense. Western analysts believe that Ukraine is strategically bleeding Russia's economy by targeting critical infrastructure, making it increasingly costly to sustain the war. The symbolism is undeniable. While the U.S. Navy was freeing human lives from steel boxes, the flames of the Crimea Bridge were trapping Russia inside its own political and military cage. Each represents a different kind of liberation, one physical, one strategic, but both strike at the heart of oppression. As the global community reacts, Washington has praised the Navy and DEA for their swift coordination, calling the operation a landmark victory in the fight against human exploitation. Meanwhile, Moscow's silence after the Crimea strike grows more tense by the hour, with intelligence reports suggesting an emergency military council convened to assess vulnerabilities in the Black Sea region. The contrast couldn't be clearer: one nation using power to save lives, another using it to sustain destruction. It's a mirror of the choices facing the modern world: to protect or to control, to liberate or to dominate. Even as the seas calm and the fires fade, both events will echo for years. The images of steel containers filled with survivors will haunt the conscience of nations, pushing for stronger maritime oversight, tougher anti-trafficking laws, and greater humanitarian vigilance. The smoking ruins of the Crimea Bridge will haunt the ambitions of an empire that overreached and underestimated the resilience of those it sought to subdue. In a world teetering between chaos and order, both stories remind us that the struggle for justice, whether on the ocean or in occupied lands, demands courage, precision, and the unyielding will to act. The US Navy's role in both the moral and tactical arenas continues to evolve. From stopping pirates and smugglers to carrying out humanitarian rescues, its mission now transcends combat. It's about defending not just borders, but principles: the belief that human life, freedom, and dignity must be protected no matter how deep they're buried. And as Russia faces the impossible task of holding on to Crimea amid relentless strikes, the contrast between those missions could not be starker. Where one side saves, the other destroys. Where one builds alliances, the other isolates itself. Where one rescues people from steel boxes, the other traps itself behind walls of denial and propaganda. In the end, both events serve as reminders that strength is not measured by might alone, but by purpose. The US Navy and DEA showed that even in the darkest corners of the world, justice can still find its way through steel and silence. And the Crimea Bridge, once a monument to conquest, now stands as a warning that no empire is immune to collapse when its foundation is built on oppression. As the waves crash against the shorelines of history, the stories of this week will be remembered not just for their drama, but for what they revealed about the choices humanity continues to make between compassion and cruelty, between liberation and domination, between fire and freedom.